It's easy to understand that being overconfident and arrogant is the work of the ego. But it's harder to deal with it when we're looking at low self-esteem, depression, and anxiety. If we think badly of ourselves, or we have friends who may feel this way, how can we support and assist in the best way? To say it is the ego feels quite harsh for someone who may already be in a negative cycle. Okay. So when we talk about the ego, most of us understand the ego to mean arrogance. So if somebody walks around or prances around as though they are king or queen of the universe, we would say, oh my God, that person has such an ego. Okay, that's colloquially, it's how we are used to referring to it. So it ends up being nearly synonymous with very arrogant, very full of themselves, think that they are the best. But that's actually just a colloquial use of ego. The actual concept of the ego, and particularly on a spiritual level, when we're talking about softening it or dismantling it. I don't like to talk about things like annihilating it. Those are the terms that you'll hear really frequently. The problem with that, though, that I have found on a personal level is, as I always say, when you're doing battle within yourself, you're going to bed with the loser anyway. So I try not to use concepts, and this is just what I've discovered with my own self. If I'm thinking about vanquishing something in myself or beating something in myself, it's creating this sense of a war inside. And even though, yes, I know that certain parts or certain instincts are higher and better than other parts or other instincts, nonetheless, the loser of that war is in my bed also. And so I've found that it's a lot more gentle if we talk about understanding or seeing, and in some cases embracing aspects of ourselves rather than beating them down or vanquishing them or annihilating them. So the ego in this context is the aspect of ourself that forms in childhood of who we think we are, how we identify. And so, for example, when children are growing, there's a beautiful stage in development. I don't know if anybody's ever played hide and seek with really little kids, but what they do is they'll sit in the middle of the room and squeeze their eyes shut, because if they can't see you, you can't see them. And the idea that you can see them sitting in the middle of the living room with their eyes closed, even though they can't see you, is inconceivable to them. And it's inconceivable because the ego structures have not yet formed. And so they're not yet at a place of awareness that I'm separate from you. I may not be able to see you, but you can see me. If you take something in front of one of them and you put it behind your back, they think it's disappeared, because it no longer is in their visual field. So it's really I'm the center of the universe, I am the universe, melted time of existence. And it's very, very beautiful. It's a beautiful, those of you who have parented children, it's a beautiful phase of development. But for very important reasons, an ego develops. And it develops because in order to exist in society, we need to understand that I'm different from you. So as many parents tell their children, sweetheart, your sister was playing with that toy. You need to ask before you take it from her. Or sweetheart, those cookies are your brother's. You cannot snatch them. You need to ask. And we have to teach things like that because that's what we call socialization. You know, we could debate the good or the bad of socialization, but we won't go there. It's an interesting debate. It's not this question. But nonetheless, in our society, we're expected to behave in a certain way, and that involves not snatching food off of other people's plates, not taking clothes off of other people's backs, really having a clear sense of where I end and you begin. What are my rights? What are your rights? How do we operate in this world with manners, with politeness, with all of the things that we're taught as we grow? Now, in order for us to have all of that, we have to have these ego structures in place. For me to understand the difference between your cookies and my cookies, I have to understand that you're different from me. Otherwise, they're just cookies, and whoever gets them into their mouth first wins. If you're going to try to teach me that those are yours, well, I have to have a structure in place that understands what me means. And that's the ego. So it begins very innocuously. It begins actually as something that serves us, that benefits us. As we grow, it gets stronger. This is what I'm good at. I'm an artist. I'm a musician. I'm the smart one in the class. I'm mama's little boy. However we begin to self-identify as we grow. And as we grow, it gets thicker and thicker. I'm pretty, I'm ugly. I'm white, I'm dark. I'm this religion or that religion. Rich or poor. Popular or not popular. Cool or a nerd. Popular or, the one who eats lunch alone. And slowly, as we go through our school years and as we start to get older, this concept of our ego just gets so thick that we forget that it was actually something to simply help us kind of get along. And we start to think that it is who we are. And so the ego structures become literally the cage in which we live. This is who I am. I'm the child of alcoholic parents, therefore I have trust issues, I have addiction issues. That's just who I am. I grew up very, very poor with nothing. That's why I have a sense of scarcity. It's why I'm always trying to grab and hold. It's why I feel like there's never enough. It's just who I am. I was abandoned or abused by my parents or one of them. It's why I have difficulty with relationships. Why I can't get close to people because I think people will just hurt me. It's just who I am. So every time we find ourselves saying or thinking, it's just who I am, that's ego speak. And ego speak is the same whether that's just who I am, is queen of the universe, the best, the smartest, the prettiest, or the lowest of lowest, serf in the universe. Can't do anything. Useless. worthless. They're both ego speak. And so when we feel badly about ourselves, it's the ego. It's the ego saying, you're not good enough. And here's the interesting thing about the ego. It's really very much like a blank cassette. It was programmed based on what we got mostly when we were young. Most of that ego programming is done in early childhood. So the stuff that we get into our subconscious, you're the smart one, you're the stupid one, you're the best one, you're the worst one, you're the one who's the first choice, you're the one who always gets left behind. Or just culture of our families. This is how we do things. Right? There's a lot of people, a lot of families, a lot of cultures where we have that sense. This is how we do things. This is the type of people we are. Again, it's ego. Not with a judgment, not good, not bad. It's certainly beneficial to those who would like to socialize or acculturate us. It's good for us to understand what we do. But the part within me that understands that is my ego. Otherwise, who's we? I mean, if you say to me, this is what we do, but I don't have a strong sense of ego structures, well, we is everyone. That border between us and them, this is we, this is not we, comes only from my ego structures. Otherwise, somebody says, this is how we do things. And I understand that to mean we as in the global family of all races, all colors, all cultures, all species. I mean, we is everyone. So in order for me to understand we, us, I need to have an ego structure that knows, well, which we am I? I mean, there's a black we, there's a white we, there's a brown we, there's a red we, there's a yellow we, there's a tall we, there's a short we, there's a rich we, there's a poor we. Which we am I? That's what my ego structures do. So going specifically back to the concept of if I'm feeling bad about myself, or I have a friend who's feeling badly about themselves, not due to a particular act, I did something really wrong. In cases like that, repentance is a good thing. The goal of life is not always how can I feel great about myself. This is a somewhat of our kind of new agey spirituality. Is, well, let's just look at the positive of everything. Well, you can live on that level at sometimes, but it really removes the concept of personal responsibility. If I've just done something that's hurt another person, the goal is not how can I find the positive in that. To the person who was hurt, we might say, okay, instead of being miserable, how can you take a lesson here? But if I was the perpetrator, my goal is not how can I feel great about myself, but rather how can I understand why I needed to do that and change. And I mention this just briefly because when we talk about helping people feel better about themselves, sometimes the easiest way to feel better is simply to acknowledge, God, I really made a mistake. I made it because I was angry. I made it because I was under stress. I made it because I wasn't thinking clearly. I made it because I was jealous. I made it because I was greedy. I made it because whatever it was. even because I didn't know better. There are times we make mistakes without any of those reasons. We just didn't know better. Okay, well now I know. And so the best way to feel better is just to understand I made a mistake. It's not who I am. I'm not the mistake. A mistake happened through me. How can I try to ensure it doesn't happen again? How can I pray for the strength to help it not happen again? And again, not by doing battle with myself. Not, it happened because I was angry, therefore I'm going to annihilate my anger. But rather, I'm going to look in and see, what was it? What made me so angry? There were 10 people in that room when that guy said that thing. Out of 10 people, why was I the only one that was so furious that I had to react in that way? The other 9 people didn't seem to get so angry. What did it trigger in me? And again, not to blame ourselves, but to understand ourselves. And then to be able to move forward. So that's one piece. But if it's a general sense of just in general feeling badly about ourselves, to understand that is ego, and to try to understand, where does that come from? There's a beautiful line in a poem by Khalil Gibran that's about giving. The poem's about giving, but I love this particular line, and I meditate on it in so many different ways. And he's encouraging in the poem people to give, and to give freely. And I'm going to paraphrase, but he says something about how we deprive people because we find them not worthy of our gifts. And he says, but if the universe has deemed someone worthy of their days and their nights, who are you to judge them unworthy? And I take this in on a lot of levels at a lot of different times. If the universe has deemed us worthy of our days and our nights, the divine, by whatever name, whatever form, however we conceive of God, clearly there's a plan, a capital P plan. And if there's a capital P plan, there must be a capital P planner. However we conceive of that planner doesn't matter. But if that planner were fallible, if that planner were planning randomly, then it would be a lowercase p planner, not a capital P planner. Then it would just be like the rest of us. What makes a capital P planner is the concept of perfection. The concept of omniscience, all knowledge. And again, as we always speak in here, that doesn't mean it always feels good. But it means that there's a perfection in the plan. And so if that perfect plan has deemed us worthy of our days and our nights, worthy of occupying our space here on planet Earth, who are we to second guess that? If we were not worthy of occupying our space, of our days and our nights, of the breath that fills our lungs, you can be sure that capital P planner would remove us. And until and unless that happens, we have to have faith that we're here for a reason. And feeling worthless, feeling badly about ourselves is just, it's a way, in a way also, to prevent us from activating who we really are. Because low self-esteem is an incredible extinguisher of energy. Most of us at some point in our lives have probably been super passionate or excited or activated to do something. And then the next thing we know, there's a voice in our head that says, it's going to fail. You're stupid. Who do you think you are to be able to do this? You don't have the brains. You don't have the ability. You don't have the money. And it just goes. And so feeling badly about ourselves on an unconscious level is actually a way to keep ourselves from really living up to who we're supposed to be. If I can keep criticizing myself and keep pushing myself down and keep preventing myself from stepping up to the plate of my life, it's easy. I mean, I know this. I know what low self-esteem feels like. No new challenge today. But if I'm going to not have the low self-esteem and actually have to step up to that plate, well, I don't know what the day may bring. And that's where courage comes in. So it's also important to look at it if it's been a long pattern of, why am I holding on to this? What is this doing for me? What box is it keeping me in that feels so safe? And the last piece is to understand, of course, who programmed that tape that plays in our minds. Not to blame them. Not to have yet another reason that which happened 40 years ago is to blame for where I am today. But just to understand ourselves. That's the voice of my 5th grade teacher who happened to be getting a divorce that year and who told me that I would never become anything. And look at that. Her voice is still playing in my head 30 years later. That's the voice of my mom, doing the best she could. She tried. She was 25 years old. What did she know? Comparing me to my brother or my sister and saying, he cleans up his room. He's such a good boy. What's wrong with you? And if we're able to isolate these voices, we're able to understand that they're not the voice. They're not even our inner voice. They're just voices that we heard at a very impressionable age. At an age when we weren't able to understand our teacher was going through a divorce, or our mother, who seemed at that time so old and omnipotent, now we're able to realize she was a kid, really just wanted my room cleaned, but in that moment of exasperation said something that now plays in my brain every day. If we're able to understand where they come from, it gives us some clarity. And it also frees us from the power. Because if I'm able to say, oh, that has nothing to do with today, and everything to do with my 5th grade teacher's divorce, or everything to do with my mother's exasperation, then I'm able not to feel bad about myself. And able to actually just embrace and move on into who I'm really supposed to be.